Today we're going to be talking about how to find the start time if we are given the end time and elapsed time. To do this, we're going to be using a linear model. So first, let's talk about what linear models look like when it comes to time. As we can see, the line shows the numbers 1 through 12, and it shows it 2 times. And this represents AM and PM. The left side of the line right here shows AM, and that's 12 a.m. all the way over here. And AM stands for ante meridian, which basically means before midday. And midday is another word for noon. And the right side of the line shows PM, which means post meridian, which means after midday. And right here is 12 p.m., which means noon. And that right there is what divides our clock into AM and PM. So now let's look at our word problem. James has a soccer game that lasts 3.5 hours. If his game ends at 1:15 p.m., what time did the game start? So we know the time the game ends and how long the game lasts, and what we are looking for is the start time. So that means we need to count backwards on our number line. So let's start by putting a dot at 1:15. And as we can see, in between each of our tick marks, which are our hours, we have 3 little smaller tick marks, and that's 15, 30, and 45. So we need to put a dot at 1:15 p.m. So in order to go backwards, the easiest way to do this is to find the friendliest number, which would be 1 o'clock, because we need to go backwards. So let's do that, and that's minus 15, and then now that we are on an hour, we can just go back the rest of the hours. So we would need to go back 3 full hours. So let's count those. That's 1, so 1 o'clock to 12 o'clock. And that's minus 1 hour. Go back a second time. Minus 1 hour. And now we're at 2 hours and 15 minutes, but we know we have to go back 3.5 hours. So let's go back 1 more full hour, and that's minus 1 hour. And now we've gone back 3 hours and 15 minutes, but we needed to go back 3.5 hours. So that means we need to take 15 more minutes away. So let's go ahead and do that right here. Put a dot, and that's minus 15, and that right here lands us at 9:45 a.m. And we're keeping in mind that we changed it to AM because we started at 1:15 p.m., but we crossed 12 p.m., which is our midday, and we're going backwards in time, so we changed it over to 9:45 a.m. And then now, let's kind of quickly look at what this would look like in a set model, just so we have another idea of what this could look like. Over here, we have this split up into our hours and minutes, and we started at 1:15 p.m. and we want to go backwards. So I went back 15 minutes, just like we did over here, 15 minutes, and that landed us at 1 p.m. We're going back an hour, and we did that 3 times, so we went from 1 p.m. to 12 p.m. to 11 a.m. to 10 a.m., and then took away 15 more minutes, which landed us at 9:45. And over here, I kind of did the math to show that I went back 3.5 hours, just like it told us to in our work problem. So each time I subtracted an amount of time over here, I wrote it from 3 hours and 30 minutes minus 15 minutes, and then just went on and on until I was down to 0. So that kind of gives you a little bit of an idea of what the set model would look like. So now let's kind of talk about the connections that we can make with time and other subjects. Regrouping is a connection because the Make 10 approach helps the students because it gets them to a friendly number where it's easier for them to count. And the Make 60 approach is similar with time because we want the kids to make 60, which puts them on the closest hour and creates a friendly number, which is exactly what we did right here whenever we went from 1:15 p.m. to 1 o'clock p.m. We went back to find the friendliest hour, the friendliest number, and then went back because it's easier to count that way. And now, composing and decomposing using place value is also a connection that could be made for base 10 and base 60. because in base 10, the place values are hundreds, tens, and ones, whereas the place values in times are hours, minutes, and seconds. And understanding place value essentially leads to better understanding of how to regroup, because you need to know that 59 minutes turns into 60 minutes, but 60 minutes actually equals 1 hour. And then, so counting backwards is also connection. We counted backwards right here just in our word problem, and that's a connection that we use with subtraction. So when students have to go backwards in time, just like the word problem we used today, they can relate to counting backwards in base 10, which is something that they have already learned. And then one major misconception that can be made a lot is going back to regrouping in base 60, because the students are so used to being taught in base 10 because that's what they learn first. So students have this misconception because they're first taught in base 10 and they've practiced regrouping, like 10 ones equals 110 and 10 tens is 100. Meanwhile, time is very different and is in base 60. So now the students have to know to regroup 60 seconds equals 1 hour, and, or not 60 seconds, 60 seconds equals 1 minute, and 60 minutes equals 1 hour. And I could help the students overcome this misconception by showing them the analog clock, which is the circular clock, and show them that it has 60 tick marks on it, and each of the tick marks represents 1 minute. And so if there's 60 tick marks, then that means there's 60 minutes, and we know that 60 minutes regroups into 1 hour, and that would be the way that I would teach elapsed time.